Hello, my name is John Hammond and welcome to Smart from the Start, a program about education. You know, there may be many viewers watching right now who are wondering what they are going to do when they finish school. And there may be parents who are wondering what their child may do when they leave school. And to help you along, we're going to talk about the teaching profession today. And we have a panel of experts with us. And we'd like to start with Clinton. Clinton, welcome to the program.
Thanks, John.
Where are you from?
I'm from right up the top of Australia, far north Queensland, at a place called Cairns.
How many years have you been teaching?
This is my 8th year of teaching.
And you're a principal now?
Yes, yep.
Yeah. Now we're going into ancient history. Hello, Mark. Welcome to the program.
It's nice to be here, John.
You do keep very good health, don't you?
Yeah, thank you.
You are a principal, I believe?
That's correct.
Whereabouts?
Based in Melbourne and of a prep to 12 school right at the very southern part of the mainland of Australia.
And how many years teaching have you done?
I've done around about 24 years of work in the classroom and administration.
Natalie, it's really nice to have you. And tell us about your school. Whereabouts do you teach?
I'm a primary teacher at a school in Melbourne, and I've been teaching, well, this is my 7th year now, yes.
And welcome, Josh.
Thank you, John.
You're one of the youngest set. How many years have you been teaching?
1.
1 year. That's not an apology, that's a boast.
No.
And whereabouts are you teaching?
I'm lucky enough to be at a school called Macquarie College on the east coast of Australia in a city called Newcastle.
Yeah. You know, folk, we have looked around a system of over 50 schools to find the best teachers, and they're sitting here right in front of you. They'll be very modest. But let's just take a look at the teaching profession. Historically, you only have to go back about 150 years, and if you could speak, if you could spell, and you could count to 10, you were considered to be a qualified teacher. Mind you, you weren't paid very much. And the size of some classes would really blow you away. It was not unheard of to have a class, wait for it, panel, 150 students. And they used to use monitors, and these monitors would come running up to the teacher's desk, and the teacher would tell them what to do, and they would run off. Well, we did grow a little bit from that, and they took some of the smarter monitors and they invited them to become pupil teachers. And these pupil teachers did an actual apprenticeship. And so they did about 3 or 4 years until they finally became a teacher. Well, come 100 years ago, and they realized that teachers needed to have some form of credential, and so teachers actually became certificated. And then they got diplomas. And today, we have teachers who have to have degrees, and nobody, particularly in this country, can go into teaching these days unless you have a degree, and it is hard work. You are highly trained. Any young person who's watching, if you are contemplating teaching, you just stay tuned and come back, because we're going to tell you a lot more about teaching. Welcome back to Smart from the Start. We're talking in this session about teaching as a profession. And I sometimes marvel that I ever became a teacher, because nobody hated school more than I did. I learned true humility because my younger brother finished his schooling 4 years ahead of me. And I guess I believed, as did many other boys and girls, that teachers lived in caves, ate raw meat, and possibly little boys and girls that they caught in the street at night times. Teaching did just not agree with me. And yet the day came when I was finishing school, I still didn't know what I was going to do. I don't know about you, panel, but you maybe had clear visions of what you were going to do. But not this boy. I had no idea, and finally I thought, after somebody suggested that I'd make a good secondary teacher. And so I rolled up to Teacher Training College. and I was going to be a secondary teacher. I despised primary teachers. In fact, we called them, excuse me, primary screechers. And after 2 years, I was called into the dean's office, and he said, look, you can't go on. There's something wrong with your grade point average. And he said, it just doesn't exist. And the only course left to me was primary teaching, primary screeching. And it was with a great deal of humility I came in and I taught my very first lesson. And I tell you what, folks, the lights just came on that day. I ran out of that room rejoicing, and I knew that teaching was for me. And I taught primary teaching, screeching, for 7 years before I ever became a high school teacher. But that background as a primary teacher was just absolutely fantastic. Now, I'd like to start with you people, but, you know, before I listen to you tell your story, I just want to remind you that things weren't always as good as they are now. I actually have here a document called The Rules for Teachers, 1915. And I think this is actually designed for the ladies, but just listen to some of these. You will not marry or engage in unseemly conduct during the term of your contract. You are not to keep company with men. You must be home between the hours of 8 p.m. and 6 a.m. unless attending a school function. You may not loiter downtown in ice cream stores. You may not ride in a carriage or automobile with any man unless he is your father or brother. Now, the men are looking rather smug, folk. I've got one for you. Men teachers may take 1 evening per week for courting purposes, or 2 evenings if they go to church regularly. Now, was this the reason you were a regular church attender? But I'd like to start with you, Mark, because I know you were, but what was that spark that brought you into the teaching profession?
Yes, John, I spent a number of years in other professions before I became a teacher, and I enjoyed my time as a carpenter. I enjoyed my time as a gravedigger, and I certainly earned far more money while I was in advertising. But none of those jobs gave me the level of satisfaction that teaching has given me.
Was there a person or an event that took you into teaching?
There were 2 people, 2 particular teachers of mine that had an influence on me. One of them was my maths teacher, and an enthusiastic man, a Christian gentleman, and I was privileged to actually have him on my staff when he retired just a couple of years ago, and a great inspiration.
Josh, I've seen you talk to student teachers and enthuse them, and you're only in your first year. You are known to be a very good teacher. What was that little something that I'm going to be a teacher?
Yeah, I guess there's so many factors that contribute, and I've always loved learning, and just that process of engaging in a learning experience, both from a learning and a teaching point of view, and I just love being part of that. And so in some ways it was a natural progression after school, but also it was at a time in life and I just didn't know what to do. I felt a bit lost, and I was praying about it a lot at the time and just really trusting God with my future, and I actually ended up getting a scholarship to go to Avondale. And I wasn't really crash hot on the idea at the time, and I thought I'll give it a go, and I may transfer or something else. But once I was there and just experiencing sort of where God was taking me and what I was learning, I just knew it was what I wanted to keep doing.
I was interested to notice that you mentioned Avondale, and I know what Avondale is because I went there, and I suspect that some of us did. And Avondale College is a senior training institution of the Seventh-day Adventist Church here in the South Pacific, and a lot of teachers have come through that college. They graduate several hundred every year. But Clinton, you didn't go to Avondale College. Which training institution did you go to?
I trained in Sydney at Macquarie University.
And were there any advantages in doing your training at a secular university?
Yeah, I think so. I think, you know, you meet people and lecturers there who might come at it from different angles. Yeah, you learn where different people are coming from. So it's not just one thing you're learning, from lots of different angles.
Would there be some disadvantages?
Yeah, well, some of the classes were about 400 in size.
Wow.
So you sort of got lost in the crowd a little bit.
Yeah. Wow.
Certainly didn't know the lecturers by name or anything like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there are some disadvantages as well.
I know that I preached at a church in Sydney one day, quite a few years ago, and I saw this striking young man coming out the door, and I asked him his name. He said Clinton Bond. And when I found that he was doing teaching, well, we got onto you fairly quickly, didn't we, Clinton?
Yeah.
And it's great that he is one of our principal. Natalie, how did you get into it?
Well, John, I used to be a student at Gilson College, which is where Mark is at present, and I clearly remember sitting in class and thinking, who would want to be a teacher? Definitely not for me. And in a roundabout way, applying for university subject courses, and then getting a scholarship to go to Avondale. And I thought, well, just like what you said, I'll give it a go. So I transferred, deferred for a year and went to Avondale, loved it so much, and stuck with the teaching.
Yes. There have been many highs and lows in your careers, and I assume that there have been more highs than lows. And we would invite you to just stay with us and come back, because when we start again, we're going to talk about some of the highs and lows of teaching. Welcome back to Smart from the Start. We're talking about education, and more particularly we're talking about the teaching profession. You know, I have heard some rather cynical comments made about teachers. One wag said, those who can do and those who can't teach. And the other rather sad one is a teacher is a man among boys and a boy among men. But let me tell you something about the teaching profession I learnt from my children. As my children grew up as little babies, you know, everything that Daddy said was correct, and everything that Mummy said was mostly correct. But the very first day they started school, they came home and they said, teacher said so-and-so today. And when I said, no, well, that's not quite right. But Daddy, you're not my teacher. And teaching, I would have to tell you, and I'm sure you teachers agree, that it is the best training for any other profession. Be it politics, medicine, public life, civil service. If you do teaching, then you have that preparation because you learn to communicate with people. We're going to hear from these communicators now, because teaching is not all up. There are some downs as well. There are some great highs and there are some great lows. I mean, I had a low. There is no low you can have as a teacher when you have a school excursion and one of your children dies. To come home, to have to contact the parents, to have to prepare the school, it is very, very sad. But there are some marvellous highs. I've seen young people in primary school and in secondary school just give their heart to Jesus, and to know that a lot of these children have grown up and they are my best friends today. It's marvellous. Now, what about you? We'll start with you, Natalie. Do you have a low that you can share, or is it all highs for you?
Well, I'd like to say it's all highs, but there are some lows. Teachers are not perfect, and we don't have all the answers. I mean, oftentimes I'll have parents come to me and seek answers, and it is more of a partnership rather than...
Do you get many critical parents?
Oh, sometimes, yes.
You handle them?
We tried, I try the best I can.
Do you folk feel that every mother feels that they've given birth to another Einstein, and sometimes they're not just quite that way? What's the real high for you, Natalie?
Oh, seeing the children succeed, and really when the lights come on and they've grasped quite a challenging concept, or when they're really involved in a Bible class and just asking all these in-depth questions which you would expect from children that are quite older. But
Josh, experienced teacher, what is this, midway through the year?
Yep.
And you've had highs and lows already?
I have. I guess in terms of a low, I think back to a previous school where I did my internship. It was actually a state school, and I had a student who just would not work at all in class, and he actually would sit there, and I would say to him, you know, I'd really appreciate if you could, you know, get on with your work. And I said, it eventually got to the point where I said, if you don't do some work, you're gonna have to come back and see me at recess. And he said, that's fine. And he'd just sit there, perfectly behaved all class, and then come back and see me at recess. And this went on for a few periods. And I started to get a bit worried about him, and I started just to inquire a bit more about him. And it turned out he was in a foster home situation where he was having to choose today whether he's going to stay with this foster home or whether he's going to move to another one. And when you see kids dealing with that sort of thing in their personal lives, it's pretty tough.
It is rewarding too. Clinton, far north sunny Queensland, you got some highs and lows of teaching?
Well, one of the lows probably even happened this year. Had a student who was a little bit difficult on a particular day. He didn't feel like doing the work. So he decided to start yelling, and after I told him to move up the back, he wouldn't. And, you know, what am I to do? I'm not just the teacher, I'm the principal. They're supposed to listen. And it didn't quite work that way. And yeah, it just escalated from there, and nothing was working really well. But in the end, I suppose it turned out all right, because after that day, I wrote out a detention slip for him. And the next day I showed it to him and said, listen, I'm willing to forget the whole thing if things change from here. And I said, are you willing to do that? And he said, well, yeah. I said, well, this detention slip, and I ripped it up and threw it in the bin. I said, it never happened, did it? And I haven't had a problem since.
Somehow sense there's a little bit of theology there, don't you? Come on, Mark, you've many years of experience. What's a real high spot in your teaching life?
The high spot? Probably, I think back to one class where I don't know what precipitated it, but both the students and I were unable to stop laughing. And we just continued to laugh and laugh and laugh. And I was biting my tongue. I was trying to cause pain. I said, come on, folks, let's focus. I would look at them. They would dissolve into laughter. And at the end of that class, we all just left the room with tears streaming down our faces. And I had to explain to the prac teacher that was in my room what was going on, that it wasn't normally like that. Economics can be a little dry and boring. It's not normally that emotional.
Now, Mark, I sense the warmth and the excitement of you as a teacher. I want you to look at the camera, and you are talking to a younger person who is wondering what to do. Can you just wrap it up quickly and say, this is why you should do teaching?
Okay. I guess the opportunity to be able to stand before a group of young people, to be able to look at those young people and to show your enthusiasm. Enthusiasm is a great word. It comes from two Greek words, entheos, meaning with God. And if you've got enthusiasm, if you're with God and you're in the classroom, you're able to share your life's experience with them, there's nothing greater and nothing more exciting.
Isn't that a wonderful testimony? Well, wasn't that inspirational? Inspiring teaching and inspired teachers. You know, you may be a teacher and you may teach in a secular school. My colleagues here and I, we've all taught in Christian settings. But I just want to conclude by reminding you about the master teacher, the Lord Jesus Christ. You know, he had some remarkable abilities. He could engage a crowd and an individual within 10 seconds. The woman at the well of Samaria, just instantly, he just had her like that. Storytelling, he was the master storyteller. He could speak to 15,000 people without a microphone. He loved his audience. He knew them. He knew their future, and he died for every single one of them. You know, panel, I really appreciate having had the opportunity just to share with you, because you love teaching, you love children, and to our prospective teachers, give it a go. Take up teaching. It is a wonderful career, and God bless you.